Hello there and welcome to the Business Weekly Show here on Citi TV, your most watched business show in the country. My name is Michael Obodu. In the next 1 hour, I'll be bringing you highlights from the world of business this week. If you're ready, let's go. After all the initial troubles with the whole debt exchange program, the dust appears to be settling down now. Some progress has been made as the government has come to some form of agreement with the Ghana Association of Banks and the Ghana Insurance Association on the program. The ultimate is that we are now getting closer to securing a deal with the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Finally, there is agreement between the government and the Ghana Association of Banks over the domestic debt exchange program. The association had earlier instructed commercial banks to hold off on approving the revised debt exchange offer until its members' needs were satisfied. They claimed that the key reason for this was the lack of confidence surrounding how the debt restructuring would affect the banking sector. In a joint statement, both parties have agreed to pay 5% coupon for 2023 and a single coupon rate for each of the 12 new bonds, resulting in an elective coupon rate of 9%. They also agreed on clarity on the operational framework and terms of access to the Ghana Financial Stability Fund and the removal or amendment of all clauses in the exchange memorandum that empower the Republic to, at its sole discretion, vary the terms of the exchange. Banking consultant Dr. Christian Techijan gave more perspective on some aspects of the agreement that was arrived at.
So earlier with the agreement, there wasn't going to be any payments. It was a zero payment coupon for the 2023. But now with the new agreement that's been reached, the amendment that's been done, 5% is going to be paid. Hitherto was a 0% coupon payments for 2023. 2024 was going to be 5%. 2025 was going to be 10% and subsequently 10% until the final payment. So this new agreement goes to modify the old one where there wasn't going to be any payments to be made in 2023. So now we are going to see 5% payments being made. This is to augment the liquidity position of the banks, because assuming a customer had come to deposit for a period and for the whole year of 2023, there isn't going to be any payments, definitely is going to put a strain on the liquidity of the banks. So though Bank of Ghana has got a framework where they offer liquidity support to a lot of these banks, with this one coming into place, it goes to augment what is already being done.
Economist Professor Peter Quote has been commenting on this development.
It could have been better, but I think it's a positive signal. The financial institutions will have some resources to maneuver. At least they might not be running into losses. There will be significant revenue derived from the 5%, and that can help them stay afloat. So for me, it's a step in the right direction, and I hope going forward, dialogue, consensus building will continue. If we have done this and done it well, I believe we wouldn't be going through some of the turbulence and all the challenges that we face. We should bear in mind that the financial sector, money doesn't like noise. The financial sector doesn't like these kinds of disturbance. So we certainly have to communicate very well at the right time so that we ensure financial stability. It's a step in the right direction. At least it's movement or a step from the previous situation where there were going to be zero coupon or zero interest on bonds for 2023. So the 5% coupon rate for 2023 for me is good.
Dr. Techijan is confident of a revamp of confidence in the sector following the agreement between the government and the Ghana Association of Banks on the domestic debt exchange program.
There had been a lot of uncertainty within the banking sector, looking at what had been drawn up in terms of the debt exchange program. The gains that have been made after the banking sector cleanup after 2016, 2017, I would say everything was being eroded. But with this consensus being reached, I'm sure there should be calmness restored within the banking space. And I'm also sure that now the banks know the way forward as far as their liquidity challenges. Should they run into such with the setting up of the Ghana Financial Sector fund that is going to help them in terms of how they will be able to assess such funds should they run into liquidity challenges, has now been made clear to them, and they know the way forward as far as how to assess the funds is concerned. So I think it's a very good thing. Now everybody it's in sync with what is happening, and calmness has really been restored in terms of the uncertainties that was bedeviling everyone else.
Meanwhile, government and the Ghana Insurance Association have reached an agreement on the participation of insurance companies in the domestic debt exchange program. Under the agreement, insurance companies will participate in the program on similar terms as the banks. In a joint statement on Thursday, government says through the solvency window of the Ghana Financial Stability Fund, it will provide support for the insurance companies that are seriously affected by the domestic debt exchange program. The government says the objective is to protect jobs and stabilize the insurance industry. We definitely have made some headway this week with the whole debt exchange program, but we still have a couple more hurdles to cross, as some groups still have concerns with it. The individual bondholders are still bent on getting the government to exempt them from the domestic debt exchange program. They managed to get the Agbogbo off their Sogli seat, Togbe Afede the 14th, to pledge his support to their cause.
Government's domestic bond exchange program to restructure about 137 billion Ghana cedis of debt continues to face resistance from domestic investors. Individual holders of government's bond amounting to about 8 billion cedis say they want complete exemption from the program. They are asking government to cut capital expenditure in the 2023 budget and find money to pay interest on debt owed them. The group of individual bondholders recently agreed to form a joint committee with the Ministry of Finance as part of the measures taken to get their bonds exempted. On Thursday, the Individual Bondholders Forum presented a petition to the Agbogbo of the Asogli State, Togbe Afede. Presenting the petition, the convener for the group, Senyor Hosi, explained the impact of the current form of the domestic debt exchange on private investors.
You have 89% to deal with. These 89% are structured organizations with clear incentives, support systems for them, like the banks. They are giving them forbearances, they are giving them revisions in their prudential ratios. But for individuals, there's no backup. Your financial stability fund is you begging on the street. You going out begging after all these years of saving and trying to earn dignity for yourself. Your financial stability fund is you dying out of hunger. Is you dying out of your inability to sustain health. Is you suspending the quality education of your children for 15 years as the government is proposing. Another matter that is absolutely unsustainable. We have no backup. So we come to you and pray that you add your voice, that you do not sit aloof while justice is ill-served, while the fate of 6.5 billion people is abused unfairly. People who only did one thing, to trust their government.
Togbe Afede, who sympathized with the investment community, called on the government to re-examine expenditure and make cuts where necessary to help gain economic credibility.
Once we define clearly what our debt service obligations are, then the next step to actually take is to look critically at government expenditure and government revenues to see what can be done to enhance our debt service capacity. And as I said in an article I wrote recently, we should begin to look closely at our expenditures. Okay. What expenditures can we cut out?
Togbe isn't the only one calling for expenditure cuts from the government as an alternative to the domestic debt exchange program. The Institute of Economic Affairs is projecting that billions of cedis can be saved if the government re-evaluates some of its expenditures.
The country is currently experiencing its worst economic crisis in decades, with a debt load exceeding 81 billion cedis as of September 2022. Ghana is seeking an IMF support program to the tune of $3 billion to revive the struggling economy. As part of the IMF deal, the government will undertake a domestic debt exchange program to help bring the country's debts to sustainable levels. The program has, however, faced stiff opposition from many entities that hold government bonds, including individual bondholders and corporate institutions such as banks. The government has been widely criticized for its unwillingness to make any sacrifices, but rather leave all the burden on investors. The Institute of Economic Affairs, IEA, believes the financial sector can be spared the crippling shocks of the domestic debt exchange program if government reduces its spending. Professor Alexander Bilson-Dak, who is an international fellow at the IEA, and he says government will save over 30 billion cedis annually between now and 2026 if it cuts down on its expenditure.
34 billion Ghana cedi is what government will save in terms of present value. Okay, present value of what individuals will lose to government. And if you listen carefully, the IEA has proposed another alternative DDE that could reduce this this wealth that bondholders will lose from 34 to about 21 billion, which is significant. About 15 billion Ghana cedi will be saved. In other words, will be wealth that belongs to the bondholders that will not go to government.
On his part, the executive director of the IEA, Dr. John Kwachi, touched on some of the specific areas where government can make these cuts in order to raise funds and help reduce the impact the haircut will have on bondholders.
If you owe somebody, you can't pay them. Why will you still want to maintain your lifestyle? So go and educate the bondholders and tell them that the government cannot maintain their lifestyle and withhold their savings. Okay, it should be burden sharing by all, and that's what we are asking for. The Parliament passes what they call appropriation. They approve a ceiling on the expenditure for government for the year. But who polices that? At the end of the year, we are told that government has exceeded that expenditure, and nobody holds them to account.
Some are also of the view that if the government does not reconsider its fiscal policy, the debt exchange program might not achieve much. Economist Dr. Patrick Esuming says if the governance of the country's fiscal space is not given a second look, the debt exchange program will be of no real significance. This comes as government is restructuring its debt as part of efforts to secure an International Monetary Fund IMF program. Already, it has received major opposition from various groups, with some threatening legal action to be exempted from the haircut. Speaking during the public forum on Ghana's debt exchange program organized by the Economic Governance Platform, Dr. Esuming stressed the need for financial discipline to improve the country's position.
If you look at some of the things we are talking about, so if you look at some of the things that has come out of the IE, some of the things that have come out of the individual bondholders forum, some of the things that are going to be in the current program we are discussing, a lot of them were in the last program. The issue about exemptions that is going to be discussed widely again, they were there. The issues about private property taxes were there. A lot of So we did do the Fiscal Responsibility Act. But, we've seen that when the laws are being passed, it appears that because the parliamentarians know that they are the ones who eventually run the government, it appears that there's a deliberate attempt to create a space where you can jump when it becomes necessary, so that you pass the law, but you find ways to make sure that you're not actually following what is in the law. So I think the biggest travesty from this is to is to allow the debt exchange program to go on without having a reform of how our governance run.
Meanwhile, speaking at the same event, Director of Research at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Dr. John Kwache, agrees and believes the government must consider savings that can be made by reviewing its fiscal strategy in order to ensure fair burden sharing.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough information on the maturities and the coupon rates to be able to compute that. So we said, even if we don't have it, let's go to the fiscal consolidation side and see how much savings we can make. And I think that's the paper that you said you've gone through it. So maybe as we get on, I'll provide some more detail on what kind of fiscal consolidation, expenditure and revenue measures, and indicate how much savings we could make from there. Then with that in hand, we can say that then you can mitigate the restructuring. You can use it to mitigate it. You should do both. Otherwise, you are asking the bondholders to do too much, to bear the entire brunt of this. And when the fiscal consolidation should also be doing that. And IMF should help to do that, to achieve this. You know that even the debt restructuring, they are still saying that it's a sovereign decision. Oh, that's what the IMF said. They say it's a sovereign decision. So it's at your discretion.
It's up to us.
It's up to us.
But then what options are available to us at the moment in improving the country's revenue position at this point? A senior tax services manager at KPMG is of the view that reinstating the tax amnesty could be a possible solution. He argues that this could encourage more persons to pay their outstanding taxes, knowing that they wouldn't be sanctioned. He however adds that there should be some checks put in place to prevent abuse. Last year, the Ghana Revenue Authority announced a grace period for defaulting taxpayers to fulfill their obligations without a mandated penalty. The Waiver of Penalty and Interest Act 2021, Act 1065, granted a waiver of penalty and interest on accumulated tax arrears up to the end of December 2020 for persons who made arrangements with the GRA for payment of the principal tax by end of December 2021. This saw a mad rush for compliance, which subsequently contributed in part to GRA being able to meet its revenue target of 41.94 billion Ghana cedis for last year by over 3.6 billion Ghana cedis, the highest in recent times. Despite this achievement, the government still needs more revenue to sustain the country's economy, as it's already making effort to reduce its debt burden through a debt exchange program. Speaking to Citi Business News, a senior tax partner at KPMG stressed that bringing back the tax amnesty policy could go a long way to improve the country's finances.
Because we don't have a lot of data, on tax amnesty, obviously anytime the amnesty period ends, we expect that GRA will publish some data in terms of people who have complied or people who have disclosed their taxes through the amnesty process. But today we don't have that data. But I can say that from a consultant perspective, in KPMG, over the period, anytime amnesty comes, especially the months, the 2 or 3 months to the end of the period, you will see a lot of taxpayers rushing to make sure that they comply or they report whatever they've not reported in the past. So again, you realize that the people still have issues that they want to report on. So we believe that, going forward, GRA should not necessarily scrap the amnesty as a policy.
He was quick to add that stringent measures need to be put in place to prevent abuse.
But can they have another policy where they try to modify it to say, okay, if maybe you have already participated or maybe enjoyed in the previous amnesty, if you still have some taxes that you didn't disclose previously and you want to disclose, can we waive off a portion of the interest or the penalty without necessarily saying that I'm taking it all over, so that you don't benefit again? So these are conversations that I think GRA should have with taxpayers and even consider and see how best they can bring the amnesty back. Because we think that amnesty is a way of compliance. Once you do that, taxpayers will still want. Because today we still believe that there are people who still haven't paid their taxes, for that period. We may not have the data, but if you look at how people rush to pay their taxes when it's about a month or two to the end of the period, it tells you that people still have things to pay. And GRA must still look at it, how they will come back on it.
Still on tax-related stories, and as part of the government's efforts towards improving tax arbitration in the country, it recently inaugurated the Independent Tax Appeals Board to create an avenue for persons with challenges with their prescribed tax obligations to seek redress. In our next clip, we'll bring you the reactions of stakeholders on this development and what challenges they foresee might impede the work of the board. Last week, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta swore in the first members of the Independent Tax Appeals Board. The board, which is established in line with the Revenue Administration Amendment Act 2020 Act 1029, is mandated to hear and determine appeals against decisions of the Commissioner General with respect to objects to tax decisions under Section 43 of the Act.
The essence of the Independent Tax Appeals Board is essentially to provide a fair and independent forum for dispute resolution. As you know, there are lots of disputes between taxpayers and Ghana Revenue Authority, both on the individual basis and also on corporate basis. So we are hoping to bring a sense of fairness where we can hear issues quickly and effectively with people who are trained and experts in this area. So that really is a reason. As you know, recently the Supreme Court came out of a 4-1 decision on the issue of taxpayers paying 30% of an aggrieved amount before we begin to speak. So that has become, interpretation is clear, and it will facilitate that. This will also take the pressures on the GR administration and or the Ministry of Finance to know that they are experts who stand to protect both the citizen and what the Republic deserves.
Tax consultant Dr. Alex Ampabing is pleased that the introduction of the board will bring some progress in addressing tax-related disputes in the country.
The decision to set up the Independent Appeals Board to support tax arbitration between taxpayers and the Ghana Revenue Authority, I do think is a brilliant idea. Even the thought of it is good. Considering the current tax administration setup, there's so much power given to the Ghana Revenue Authority and subsequently the Commissioner General. The GRA is more or less a self-regulator. Any tax dispute has to go through the Commissioner General. And if a taxpayer disagrees with him, it's only at the point that the taxpayer can seek a redress at the law court. And because it's only the GRA Commissioner General having to preside over so many cases, most likely will be delayed responses to dispute issues.
On the other hand, there still are concerns he feels must be addressed.
Where do we place this board? Do they come in after the GRA and the Commissioner General have met with the taxpayer and they have disagreed on the dispute? Or the board is coming in at the first point of call? That raises another question. Where is their legitimacy? Because clearly, Ghana Revenue Tax Administration is all embedded in the Tax Administration Act and the associated laws that we have. This body, where do they draw their powers from? Where is their legitimacy? So there's quite a few things that definitely we will need to address going forward.
Senior Tax Services Manager at KPMG, Gordon Dade, also believes the board must be given the required resources to deliver on their mandate.
In terms of the bottlenecks, when you look at some of the countries that have been doing this for some time now, and one of the things that you will need is for them to be well-resourced, for them to get the tools that they need to operate. Because if you look at the law that actually was passed, the law talks about creating a secretariat. Okay, so we expect that, once they've been set up, the secretariats will be in place. They have the tools that are required to do their work. The other thing you talk about is independence. Whether they have the independence to do their work and do not have any influences or anybody influencing them to say, can you look at it in this way? So we expect that looking at them from private sector, some from government and also some of them who are even retired, they will bring their experience and then they will have the room to operate as independent board, because there's actually an independent tax appeals board, and we expect that they have that independence to do their work. So once this is clear, they have the resources, the tools, they have the independence to do their work. We believe that it will go a long way to enhance the compliance level that we are looking for.
He also stressed the need to put in place a system to measure its performance.
We believe that Appeals Board is a novel idea. It's something that if the country or the GRA works well with them, it's going to help us to really bring some sanity in the system that we have now, to get them to work to the level that we want them to get to. We believe that they should have the independence to operate, they should have the resources, and even most importantly, they should be given targets or KPIs. So, for instance, if they have about 500 cases that are reported to them, how do we ensure that this 500 is being heard timeously? Okay, so they should agree some KPIs with them, and there should be somebody who is measuring those KPIs so that they don't throw the cases to them and then, we don't see results. But to let them really work, we expect that the government should provide them with the resources, the tools. They should have the room to operate in terms of independence and also agree clear KPIs with them. And we believe that once these things are done, we'll see some growth when it comes to our tax revenue. Obviously, because compliance will go up, and that should give government some room.
Now to the energy sector. You know, the government began pushing its Gov't for oil policy in a bid to address the country's high cost of fuel challenges. Energy consultant Dr. Yusuf Sulemana is of the view that this approach might not get us the result we seek. Here's why. The price of fuel at the pumps presently stands at over 13 Ghana cedis a litre for petrol and diesel. But just a year ago, it retailed for less than half the price. The rise in price was mainly due to the sharp depreciation of the cedi against the dollar, with the local currency trading at some point in 2022 at over 16 Ghana cedis to the dollar. Consumers have lamented the spike in the price of the commodity, particularly as it negatively impacts other sectors of the economy. Inflation for the latter part of 2022 stood at a record high of over 50%. Government, in tackling the challenge of high cost of fuel, introduced the Gov't for oil policy, which will see the country trade its Gov't for fuel through a third party in some form of a barter system. Already, the first consignment under the program has arrived, and the about 40,000 metric tons is currently being sold by the Bulk Oil Storage and Transportation Company Limited, BOST. Energy consultant Dr. Yusuf Sulemana believes the effort is commendable.
If the policy works well and then it's able to minimize the impact of the volatility in terms of the exchange rate, then it could help in the prices. And I think I'll also side with the marketing company when they said it might end up stabilizing it but not reducing it. Yes, it could stabilize it, and it could only reduce it if probably the exchange, the cedi gain value, like what happened before, that could cascade to the pumps. But as I speak now, it looks we need to see the policy detail, the policy in details to be able to interrogate the nitty-gritty, because I always say that the devil lies in the details.
He stresses that we may see some stability at the pumps with the Gov't for oil policy, but we will need a more pragmatic solution to see significant drop in prices.
In most part of the globe where I operate, especially the Gulf, if you look at all these GCC states, Gulf cooperation countries, their currency is very stable for the last even 2 decades with respect to the dollar. It's almost like they are manipulating the currency, but that's a fact. That's what the economy, that's the outlook of the economy in terms of this exchange rate with the dollar and then their local currency. And the reason being that the only credible conduit that will have a resilient and more robust impact on stabilizing your currency is to minimize your dependency on external factors. In this case, when we come to petroleum products, we have to minimize the importation. We have to source some of this product locally, and that's what we've been talking about. And so what comes to mind is the refinery. I think the refinery will have a more and far-reaching positive consequences, positive ramifications, or positive impact on what the consumer pays at the pump as compared to this current policy that we are championing.
Citi TV is live on DSTV. Go to channel 363. On GoTV, access Citi TV on channel 182. On a digital TV, please press the menu button on the remote control and run a new search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access Citi TV on your television. Citi TV can be accessed on a free-to-air digital box like the GoTV and StarTimes box. Citi TV, it's your world.
I'm sure you heard about the expected increase in utility tariffs from the 1st of February this year. The Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry is lamenting the negative impact it will have on their businesses. They insist the time is just not right for such a move.
The Public Utility Regulation Commission on Monday, January 16, announced an increment in utility tariffs in the first quarter of 2023, effective February 1, despite admitting the present economic challenges. This announcement has been greeted with stiff opposition from stakeholders who lament the timing. Speaking in an interaction with the media after a meeting with the leadership of the PURC, President of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Clement Osei Amwako, explained that businesses are already bearing the brunt of the current economic hardship. Thus, any further rise in the cost of production will worsen their plight.
We are not satisfied with the price, the increment, and we think that government must do something about it, especially when the government have a policy that is going to allow industries to grow here. This is not a time that we should expect such price hike. And so the government must intervene. And for us as a chamber, we are not in agreement with them. Though they have done their bit, we'll move ahead and meet whoever is in charge. If you have to meet the government and the various, ministries, who will do that and make sure that the price come at an affordable rate where industries can produce and not to lay workers off to create a lot of panic into the system.
Meanwhile, the Executive Secretary of the Public Utility Regulatory Commission, Dr. Ishmael Aka, explained that the impending tariff adjustment is structured to favor small and medium enterprises.
Even before we engaged the chamber, PURC on its own had put in measures to protect industry. One of them was that we have been able to reverse the structure for the first time for SMEs to pay lower than those in the residential sector. When you look at the inflation figure we used, the national inflation is more than 50%. We use 42%. The exchange rate is more than 13 cedis now. We use 10.5. And other measures we've put in place to ensure that though industry will pay, they are protected, for them to still employ people and contribute to national development.
Now we take you to the Benue region, where organizations and individuals are embracing renewable energy to help fight climate change and also help the government to achieve its target of 30% renewable energy penetration by the year 2030. They are confident that with the right policies, the country will be able to achieve the government's target by 2030.
More Ghanaians and organizations in the Benue region are becoming conscious and are now embracing renewable energy as part of efforts to fight climate change. They are therefore investing more in solar energy. These individuals and organizations have taken the decision because of the cost of depending solely on the national grid. Elizabeth Hotel, located in Sunyani, which currently has one of the biggest conference centers in Ghana, with a seating capacity of about 3,000, is heavily dependent on solar energy.
For about 6-7 years now, with a strategy that we are working with in terms of our 10-year strategy plan, we have made sure that we have covered for renewable energy. So the first thing was to go for solar as our first option. So we did a 200 kilowatt system that ensures that throughout the day, for instance, we are on the solar. It changes, but during midday, around 12 to 1 p.m., usually we are solely 100% on solar, and we will get to the point where we export to the grid. So it's part of our strategy that we want to help reduce the emissions to the ozone layer.
Another organization that has invested so much into solar energy is PAS Gov't, which belongs to the Catholic Church in Sunyani. Father Peter Yao Oponkumi is a Chief Executive Officer of PAS Gov't.
What motivated me to go for solar is the high cost of energy. When we started, we were paying about 6,500 without even using air conditions. And that was a lot for a small company like this. We couldn't bear it. So the idea came because I knew that this opportunity, this option also existed elsewhere in Germany. So I decided to pursue that. I looked at the options and I came to the conclusion, no, we will have to go for solar. I was assisted by friends and also benefactors, and we were able to procure this plant.
Companies who manufacture solar products are also springing up. One of them is Back Energy, owned by Kofi Boama, a graduate from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology.
Well, the patronage, let me say, on a scale of 10, I'll say 6. People are buying. Yeah, people are buying. Particularly this year, we are doing a lot of solar pumps. Yeah, I don't know the economic challenges which is becoming the factor, but a lot of farmers, poultry farmers, piggery, a lot of farmers are going into solar water pumps.
The Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, has highlighted the need for more investments in crucial infrastructure by African governments and businesses to facilitate trade under the African Continental Free Trade Area. This, he notes, will help ensure continued productivity and sustained economic growth on the continent. He was speaking at the maiden edition of the Africa Prosperity Dialogue, Gov't World Summit 2022.
The maiden edition of the Africa Prosperity Dialogues was organized as a solution-driven initiative to fast-track the implementation of the AfCFTA. The African Continental Free Trade Area was birthed in 2018, but it still faces practical challenges. Speaking at the opening ceremony, Vice President Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia called on African governments to invest more in crucial infrastructure to facilitate trade under the AfCFTA.
Like the vision of our forebears, the African Continental Free Trade Area has set the stage for Africa's industrialization drive. But it will take concrete, strategic actions by governments and businesses on the continent, the right mix of policies, a greater sense of purpose for more robust intra-African trade to happen, to support economic diversification and the much-needed industrialization of the continent. To bring about the transformation we need, I propose 3 broad areas that we need to prioritize. First, there is the need for smart investments in critical infrastructure. As a continent, we need to produce and trade our way out of poverty and underdevelopment. And we cannot do that without investing in smart infrastructure across the continent. Whilst the last decades have seen some positive investments, there is the need for additional resources to finance the arteries for trade, which include the physical infrastructure such as roads, rail, and energy.
Secretary General of the AfCFTA Secretariat, Wamkele Mene, expressed confidence in Africa's ability to meet the $450 billion GDP projection by 2035, as this could lead to the creation of more jobs through innovative means.
We have a long way to go. We have a deficit, an infrastructure deficit of over $100 billion, as we have heard. We have a deficit in industrial output and capacity. We contribute only 2.1% to global trade and output. We contribute only 3.1% to global GDP. However, we know that our continent has attributes that will enable us to create opportunities, to accelerate growth, to ensure that young Africans have jobs here in Africa. As we've heard this morning, by the turn of the century, the largest number of working adults in the world will be in Africa, with the attendant rise in purchasing power, which will enable Africa to be one of the leading economies in the world 30 to 40 years from now. A very positive projection which you may be aware of, which I want to leave you with, and that is a projection by the World Bank, and that where we implement the AFCFTA effectively, by the year 2035, we have an opportunity to contribute to Africa's GDP $450 billion.
Executive Director of the Africa Prosperity Network, Dr. Eugene Usu, also noted that the AFCFTA is a game changer, and once fully realized, this will mean an opportunity for the growth of the country's small businesses.
In the world of increasing economic nationalism, deeper intra-Africa trade is going to be our life support and indeed the basis of our collective prosperity. We do have on this continent, we do have everything that we need to transform Africa into a global powerhouse of the future. But in my view, the game changer is going to be the speed and scope of the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
The dialogues are organized by the Africa Prosperity Network and partners, which include the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat and the Presidency of the Republic of Ghana.
We turn our attention now to the African Continental Free Trade Area as the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Herbert Krapah, is calling for deeper collaboration between investment promotion agencies across Africa to attract more investment for the growth of the continent. He's also pushing for the agencies to focus on critical areas such as infrastructure to boost intra-African trade under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement.
Africa is a continent full of potentials, and the African Continental Free Trade Area is an important key to unlock it. Unleashing continental opportunities require prioritizing issues, channeling interventions in the right direction, and removing barriers in vital sectors. In a quest to transform the economic fortunes of the continent, stakeholders in the African investment space convened in Accra to deliberate on strategic ideas to see a prosperous Africa. Speaking at the first annual African Investment Promotion Agencies Assembly in Accra, a Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Herbert Krapah, urged stakeholders to collaborate to boost the investment drive on the continent.
We will not be able to reap the dividend of AFCFTA and intra-African trade if we are not investing in infrastructure, if we are not investing in critical infrastructure and services. And that's why I'm excited that your role in ensuring that we bring the dividends and the benefits of intra-African trade to the fore is being highlighted in this annual assembly. The final one, which probably is easily the most important one for me, is the fact that you are working together. That you recognize that if you came together as a body to put your energies and your resources together, we would be able to make more gains for the continent and for our member states than if we saw our roles as individual ones.
On his part, the Chief Executive of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Yofi Grant, underscored the need for Africans to take charge of their own issues and rewrite the development narratives.
As we all said, and many philosophers have said it before, we cannot wait for others to develop us. We must develop ourselves. The conversations between African presidents, African business people, African academics must happen on our shores and on our soil. The opportunities that exist in Africa create real opportunities for wealth creation and for increasing our trade. FDI may not be the panacea for all our problems, but it's generally important, if not critical, because it brings fresh capital, it brings technology, and it brings skills but it also brings markets as well. And as we speak about how to position ourselves as investment promotion agencies, we also need to look at the impact we'll have on intra-continental trade. And that is why the issue of regionalization is important.
In our final video for the show, we bring you a story from second-hand dealers who are concerned about the government's plans to ban the importation of some goods they deal in. They are worried that this could affect their source of income and render many of them and their dependents without any meaningful livelihoods. The Concerned Second-Hand Dealers Association is calling on the government to stay all plans to ban the importation of used appliances into the country as it risks affecting their livelihood, particularly under the current economic situation. Many of the members of the association across the country closed their shops with the hope of getting the government's attention. Talks about Ghana risking being turned into a dumping ground for electronic waste have been rife, with the Energy Commission pushing the agenda to ban the importation of such products in the interest of the country. However, the president of the association, Asari Daniel, speaking at a press conference organized on the issue, insists the goods they import are up to standard and go through various checks at the ports before they are allowed into the country.
The government should therefore come to our aid by considering the huge number of people who are engaged in this business and their direct beneficiaries, and not forgetting the numerous numbers of people who are patronize these items. Now that there is economic hardship all over the world, why will one say that he is taking out job from which feeds over millions of people in this country from our hands, and not forgetting about our contribution to the Ghana's GDP? Jobo! Yeah. Jobo! Yeah. Again, if the sitting government is seeking for assistance from IMF, which it will prevent them from employing workers, where will they find jobs for us and our graduate children, which we are still feeding in our homes, due to the inability to government to find jobs for them? Jobo! Yeah. Jobo! Yeah. We are much convinced that after this press release, we will hear something good from the Energy Commission and the government.
Meanwhile, speaking to the media on the sidelines of the presser, President of the Ghana Union of Traders Associations, Gov't, Dr. Joseph Obing, while siding with the association, called for stakeholder engagements on the issue to bring a resolution to the concerns raised.
Stakeholder engagement with Energy Commission is inconclusive, and that we call that we sit with Energy Commission, and that we will not accept any ban on used goods. The fact that goods are used or second-hand does not make it unwholesome. Goods can be new and they are unwholesome. A standard and regulation that we use to decipher what is wholesome from what is not. And so we call on the government as a matter of urgency to facilitate this meeting with Ghana Energy Commission, and then we call upon Parliament also not to consider any banning of these products, because it employs a lot of people. We are talking about more than 200,000 people directly dependent on this industry. Our brothers abroad and those in Ghana, and they are dependents. So it's not a small industry, and we do not have any precedent of other countries, especially the developing ones, that we say that second-hand goods have been banned. It's never there.
And that will be all for today's edition of the Business Weekly Show here on Citi TV, your most watched business show in the country. For more business stories, please visit our website, citibusinessnews.com. My name is Michael Obodu. Thank you for tuning in. Let's connect on Twitter @MObodu. Catch you same time next week. Stay safe, stay informed. Bye-bye.